Exposed, 30 seconds after handcuffing a black driver, an amazing truth transformed everything. On a bustling street in a suburban town, the sun glinted brightly, casting playful shadows everywhere. As Marcus adjusted his rearview mirror, the echo of laughter from his son, Timmy, filled the car, a sweet distraction from the chaos of his day. He was just a regular dad trying to make ends meet while juggling his small business and a rideshare gig to feed his family. Little did he know, the stunning events about to unfold would mark him and his community forever. Today began like any other day. He pulled onto Maple Street, Uber app buzzing with potential passengers. But as he drove, a cloud of uncertainty loomed over him. Just last week, his small bakery kitchen had burned down, the ashes reflecting his own anxiety. Now, everything depended on this job to keep him afloat, to provide for Timmy, to be the dad he wanted to be, but then, as if fate was taking a turn for the worse, blue lights flashed behind him. Marcus's gut nodded. What now? He thought, pulling over with a shaky breath. As Officer Stevens approached, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. This seasoned cop had a reputation for being tough, often blinded by misconceptions that came from a place of ignorance. Without a word, he demanded Marcus step out, handcuffing him as confusion tightened like a vice around his heart. "Daddy!" Timmy cried out, clutching Marcus's favorite baseball cap, the one with the faded logo and countless memories. Standing by the side of the road, his little face twisted into a mix of fear and bewilderment, entirely unaware of the storm swirling around them. Marcus's heart broke, the love he felt spiraling into anguish at the sight of his son. Just then, a familiar voice shattered the tension. David, a community watch volunteer and a friend from childhood, rushed over. "Marcus. What is going on?" "You know him, officer." His familiar presence began to shift the atmosphere, resilient, reminding everyone of the countless summers spent together, rock-solid bonds forged in a simpler time. The weight of their shared history loomed large, stirring something in Officer Stevens that had lain dormant for years. "Let him go," David insisted, voice rising to meet the challenge. "He's a good man, a father." "You don't even know him." The murmurs from onlookers grew louder, the crowd was gathering, the air pulsing with their collective outrage. Faces filled with the kind of indignation only seen when injustice reared its ugly head. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension thickened, a palpable electric charge sparked as David's voice echoed against the dull roar of the crowd. As Marcus sat in the back of that patrol car, his memories flashed before him, Timmy's first steps, school plays, laughter around the dinner table. He had worked his life away to give his son every chance possible. His heart swelled then shattered. Would his son grow up seeing his father as a stereotype, a casualty of outdated biases? As Officer Stevens hesitated, the weight of the community's gaze upon him, the unanswered question lingered, would he see Marcus for who he truly was? In this surreal moment, the chance for transformation stood on a precipice, the future of father and son hanging delicately in the balance. What would happen next? Would bias triumph, or could empathy rewrite the narrative? The air buzzed with the potential for change, leaving everyone on edge, hoping for a breakthrough in this turbulent moment. David's voice cut through the murmurs, demanding attention. "Officer Stevens, stop for a second." Every eye fell on him. The weight of the world pressed hard against that moment, and in that shared silence, something fragile was born, voices clinging to hope. The officer's brow knitted tighter, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. It was as if the very fabric of his convictions began to unravel. I don't have time for this," he grumbled, but he didn't move. Marcus felt the heat of the handcuffs biting into his wrists, but more than that, he felt the battle for his dignity. He looked through the window of the patrol car at Timmy, who was now tucked under the sheltering arm of a nearby neighbor. The little boy was still clutching that faded cap, the last remnant of carefreeness in a moment that had spiraled into chaos. "Do you remember the summer we got our first jobs?" David pressed on, his voice steady. "We mowed lawns, saved for bikes we ride until sunset. Marcus isn't just a name in your record book, Stevens. He's your neighbor. He's my brother." Murmuring rippled through the crowd, an undercurrent of solidarity washing over the fear. The atmosphere shifted again as more voices joined in, familiar faces rallying for Marcus. "He's a dedicated dad. He serves everybody with a smile at his bakery. He's always here when someone needs help." Each word was a brick, reinforcing the wall of understanding around Marcus while the officer's gaze faltered. As the voices melded into one, an understanding began to awaken inside Officer Stevens, but doubt still lingered. A hard exterior could melt, but trust was a tough nut to crack. "Marcus," Stevens finally said, his tone softening just enough to signal a hint of reconsideration. "Why didn't you tell me about the bakery?" "I didn't think you'd care," Marcus admitted, the truth spilling over like the emotions he kept bottled up. "I'm just trying to do my best for Timmy." For the first time, the officer was forced to look past the surface. In that moment of confrontation, their shared humanity illuminated the darkness of preconceptions. But then, as if to remind them that change takes struggle, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance. More units were on their way, and with them came potential escalation. A rising tide of fear washed over the crowd. Would this moment of connection dissolve before it could root itself deeper? Would the chance for understanding slip away like sand through fingers? "Please, let us talk," David urged, stepping closer, eyes searching the officer's. "Before they arrive, let us fix this together. You know this isn't right." Tension crackled in the air, the community holding its breath. Marcus felt time stand still, the uncertainties tightening around him, each second stretching into eternity. As Officer Stevens weighed his options, he remained on the edge, confronting the choice to either hold on to ingrained biases or risk stepping into the light of awareness. For Marcus, the fate of his son's perception of him hinged on these crucial moments, teetering on the potential for dignity or despair. Would the officer choose understanding, or would he revert back to a narrative too easily accepted? As the sirens approached, the urgency grew, a new chapter waiting to unfold. Would this moment cascade into something larger, something that could change not just Marcus's life but the fabric of their entire community? The pressure built, demanding an answer in a world that felt both fragile and unbreakable. Would kindness and empathy finally win out against the relentless tide of fear? The sirens blared closer, an ominous reminder of looming decisions. David fixed his gaze on Officer Stevens, who stood at a crossroads of duty and humanity. Silence draped over the crowd, hearts pounding in unison. Time itself held its breath, waiting for an answer. "Marcus is a good man," David continued, his voice now a steady drumbeat against the siren's wail. "He wouldn't hurt a fly. He's just trying to protect his son. Just like you would." A flicker of realization sparked in Stephen's eyes. His hardened heart battled with instinct, the kind that had been nurtured by countless encounters with a system that didn't always serve justice. But in the midst of that internal war, David's words reached through, piercing layers of defensiveness. The crowd shifted, their energy an electric quilt woven from hope, fear, and courage. "You all know him," someone shouted, breaking the stillness. "He's our friend. He's our family." Others joined in, stories spilling into air, painting a picture of Marcus as a man of the community, vibrant and essential. Stevens glanced back at Timmy through the car window, where the boy looked small and lost, clutching that old cap like a lifeline. It tugged at Stevens in a way he had long since closed himself off from. A father's love was universal, undeniable. "Enough." Stevens finally replied, his voice cutting through the noise. "I have a job to do." The tension in the crowd surged, a wave of indignation washing over them. But Marcus, feeling a swell of emotion he hadn't anticipated, spoke up. I know the world isn't fair. I've been pushed down for a long time, but I'm not looking for pity. I just want a chance like anyone else. In that moment, Marcus's vulnerability dulled the sharp edges of confrontation. The words sank in deep, filling the spaces between people, connecting them with the threads of shared experience. As the patrol cars neared, glowing red and blue lights flickered like urgent signals of change. The crowd bristled but remained steadfast. You see the humanity in us, David urged, looking Stevens in the eye. If you issue that ticket or take him in, you strip away everything this man has worked for. Stevens' jaw clenched as he wrestled with the forces pulling him apart. The badge on his chest felt heavier than ever, moments from a decision that could alter lives. Marcus, he said finally, almost in a whisper. What would you have me do? The weight of the question hung between them, unspoken fears and dreams now vulnerable in the twilight. Marcus could feel the stakes, the hopes of him, his son, and an entire community balanced on the edge of this moment. Just listen, he said. That's all I ask. But before Stevens could respond, the first patrol car screeched to a halt alongside them, floodlights slicing through the gathering gloom. Officers spilled out, tension escalating as they took in the scene. The mood shifted. A silent gasp reverberated through the crowd. Would all the courage and vulnerability displayed so far stand against the weight of authority? Would they be met with understanding or contempt? An awkward quiet settled in, holding the potential for both unity and division. Marcus locked eyes with David, whose steady presence now grounded him, a lifeline amid rising dread. Would Officer Stevens find the courage to bridge the gap between duty and humanity, or would that moment of connection be swallowed by the chaos unfolding around them? All eyes focused on the officer, waiting for his response as the air crackled with possibility. The next seconds held everything in suspense, stretching into a future that felt more uncertain than ever. Stevens took a deep breath, steadying himself as he faced the two officers who had just arrived. They were rigid, their eyes scanning the crowd for unrest, for a reason to act. The sirens still echoed, a reminder of the storm brewing just beyond them. What's going on here? One of the new officers asked, his voice sharp and demanding. Stevens could feel the pressure build around him. The crowd shifted again, a sea of anxious expressions and murmurs, a collective heartbeat. Everyone waiting. Everyone hoping. It's okay, Stevens said, raising a hand to signal calm, though inside, uncertainty clawed at him. The first officer nodded slightly, still wary. Marcus's eyes burned with a mix of fear and resolve. He stepped forward, finding the courage even as the weight of the moment bore down on him. I'm just a father trying to keep my son safe, he said, his voice ringing clear in the mounting tension. I'm not a threat. A father? The impatient officer questioned, crossing his arms. What did you do to be in this situation? There was a harshness to his words that sent ripples of frustration through the crowd. David stepped in, ready to defend his friend. He did nothing but care for his child. He has been treated unfairly as so many of us have. They want him to succumb. The officers exchanged glances, and Stevens could see his partners grappling with their next move. Could they truly uphold the law while looking the other way? If he defied orders now, what would it mean for his career? But then, he glanced again at Timmy, still sitting in the patrol car, confusion painting his small face. The boy's innocent eyes seemed to pierce right through him, begging for a father's protection that risked slipping from their grasps. At that moment, doubt began unraveling inside Stevens, revealing the truth he had buried deep. The law was meant to serve and protect, but it often failed those who needed it most. Guys, wait, Stevens called out, raising his voice above the crowd. Just hear him out. A shift occurred within the group. The cries for understanding began to blend with voices of dissent, balancing on a tightrope of desperation and hope. They were no longer angry chants, they morphed into impassioned pleas, a chorus of shared humanity that surged through the air, indelibly linking everyone present. The second officer gave Stevens a pointed look, as if to say, "What are you doing?" But Stevens shook his head, his heart racing. He felt the tension in the atmosphere, swelling and crackling like static electricity before a storm. We can't just see a felon or criminal here. We have to see a man, one who loves his son, who deserves a chance. Stevens. The first officer barked, taking a step forward, ready to assert his authority. But it was at that moment that Marcus spoke again, softer this time, yet with a weight that pressed down hard. "I'm just asking you to see me for who I am," he said. "Not what you've been told." Silence enveloped them, and for a brief moment, all that could be heard was the rapid beating of hearts and the distant sirens, fading in their importance against the powerful plea for understanding. And then something changed. Some of the onlookers dropped their signs and stepped back, their eyes widening as if seeing the pieces of this puzzle connect. Stevens felt the shift within himself, a flicker of hope igniting a fire that had long been dimmed. He turned back to Marcus, suddenly aware that they were all standing at a crucial juncture. "Okay," he said slowly, his voice steadier. "Let us talk. Let us really talk." Before anyone could react, the crowd surged, fear and hope crashing together like waves against the shore. Would this be a breakthrough, or would the tide of authority push Marcus back down? As Stevens took a breath, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on him, doubts lingered. Would he have the strength to see this through? The tension was thick, yet an unexpected truth stirred just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Would they find a way to bridge the divide? Or would it all come crashing down into chaos? The atmosphere became electric as Stevens sensed the collective breath of the crowd held tight, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Marcus stood there, raw vulnerability etched on his face, his son's well-being shadowing every word. Stevens' heart raced, torn between authority and the undeniable humanity laid bare before him. "You don't even know the whole story." Marcus pressed on, his voice now rising with urgency. "I'm not just a father, I'm a man who has fought tooth and nail for his family." The officers hesitated, uncertainty flickering behind their hardened expressions. The crowd, once a uniform mass of anger, now swayed with murmurs of sympathy, an undeniable wave of shared humanity sweeping through. Just then, one woman shouted, "We've all felt fear. We've all fought." Each voice wove and intertwined, creating a tapestry of emotion that highlighted the shared struggles in their lives. Stevens felt the weight of that tapestry settle on his shoulders, heavy yet empowering. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about them all. "Exactly." David shouted, pushing past the officers as he stepped closer. "We're not just statistics or headlines. We're lives. We have stories, dreams, families." His words struck a chord, reverberating through the crowd. It was like the floodgates had opened. "I lost my job last year," an older man chimed in, his voice shaky yet strong. "Still searching for a way to feed my kids. And I know I'm not alone in this." His admission sparked more confessions, causing heads to nod in understanding. Stevens was caught by surprise. These weren't just voices rising in protest, they were voices lifting each other up. For every fear, every struggle laid bare, there was strength. He turned back, watching as Marcus's eyes glimmered with both fear and gratitude. The second officer shifted nervously, glancing toward the first. Both appeared caught off guard by the mounting swell of empathy and connection. Could they still take Marcus away? Would the scene shift if the people stood united? "Listen," Stevens said softly, calling the crowd's focus back. "I think we all want the same thing: safety for our families. Understanding where we come from." He wasn't sure if he could make them see it, but the moment felt pivotal. "Can we?" He hesitated, grappling for the right words. "Can we take a moment to just share those stories?" "Share." A voice rose from the back, filled with vigor. "Share our voices." Nods rippled through the crowd as others began chanting, "Share. Share." It echoed into the hearts of those listening. The fear began to thaw, and something warm blossomed in its place. The first officer shifted again, uncertainty flickering across his features. His authoritative mask crumbled slightly under the weight of shared vulnerability. "We're just trying to," he started, but stopped, seeming to recognize something. Stevens seized the moment, stepping in front of the officers and addressing Marcus directly. "Let us start here. Tell us everything. We need to understand." As Marcus took a deep breath, the crowd fell into a stillness that thrummed with anticipation. His voice broke the silence, carrying their fates in it. It all began when he began, his story unfolding against the stark backdrop of tension surrounding them, but before he could finish, 2 more patrol cars arrived, red lights flashing. The crowd gasped collectively, their unity suddenly threatened. The officers inside stepped out, eyes searching for unrest. Stevens felt the collective heart of the crowd plummet. Was it all about to shatter? Would they lose the connection made in that fragile moment? The stakes were higher now. As the new officers approached, tension spiked. Could they continue to stand together, to share their truths despite the looming shadow of authority? And just like that, a question lingered in the air: would their voices be drowned out once again, or would they unite against the rising tide? The new officers strode forward, their movements sharp and purposeful, but there was hesitation in the air. The sight of the crowd, people standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes filled with shared hope, seemed to rattle their authority. One officer, a young woman with a furrowed brow, glanced at her partner, and for a brief moment, the weight of the moment bore down on them. "Everyone, step back." The senior officer barked, but his voice lacked conviction, mingling with the pulse of the crowd's rising apprehension. The gathered families, friends, and neighbors remained rooted, their unity forming an impenetrable barrier against the fear. "Just hear him out," someone called from the back. "It's a matter of life and death." The words hung in the air, slicing through the tension like a knife. Marcus stood steadfast, even as the flashy lights of the patrol cars reflected unnaturally in his eyes. He drew another deep breath, eyes darting between the newcomers and the familiar faces surrounding him. "Let me finish," he urged, his voice steadier this time, infused with a desperation that felt primal. "It all began when my son was caught in a storm of consequences he didn't create." Just as his words started to re-anchor the moment, one of the new officers stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. "You need to leave now," he insisted. "We don't have time for this nonsense." "Nonsense?" Marcus echoed, incredulity bursting through his earlier stoicism. "This is my son's life. This is our life. How can you call that nonsense?" Nearby, a woman holding her child leaned forward. "We've lost so much time already. Please, let us speak. Let us be heard." Stevens watched, his heart racing as he faced an impossible choice. Could he defend Marcus, risk the ire of the officers, and stand with the crowd that was starting to resemble a tight-knit community? Or would he remain cautious, uphold the law, and hide behind the very structures that often marginalized them? The stance of the officers began to waver further, but they quickly regained composure. Anticipating escalation, the second officer reached for his radio, calling for backup. "Don't call for more," shouted David, his anger boiling over. "You'll only bring more divisions. Don't you see? We're begging for connection, not punishment." The sudden idea of reinforcements unsettled the crowd. They began to murmur, voices escalating into a cacophony of worry and determination. Marcus locked eyes with Stevens, and in that fleeting moment, he saw a flicker of understanding pass between them. Suddenly, a single child's voice pierced the tumult, rising above the noise: "I just want my dad to come home." The simplicity of the statement cut through the chaos, drawing gasps from those around. The child's mother quickly knelt down, embracing her little one, and a wave of vulnerability rippled through the crowd. Stevens felt the emotional tide rise once more, hearts beating together in vivid synchronicity. "Let the stories flow," someone shouted, rekindling that earlier thirst for sharing. "This is our moment." As stories and shouts began to bounce off the walls, Marcus took center stage again, I know of fear, but fear doesn't define us. Let me tell you why my son shouldn't have to live this way. That was the moment. Each soul present began to share their own, and from that raw vulnerability came strength. The officers stood as silent witnesses, their resolve cracking before the tide of heartfelt truth. But just as the unity reached a boiling point, a third patrol unit pulled up, higher-ranking officers stepping out, their uniforms crisp. The crowd froze for a heartbeat, a collective breath held in anticipation of what was to come. Would they clamp down on this powerful moment or listen to the undeniable tide of voices? Stevens felt a swelling sense of urgency. This was no longer just a standoff, this was a test of humanity against authority. Would they find common ground, or would the impending chaos pull them apart once again? As the officers advanced, Marcus's voice rang out, strong and true, "We are here. We matter." And suddenly, every heartbeat became a question of its own: what would unfold in the next heartbeat? The new officers approached, the atmosphere thick with tension. Their uniforms gleamed under the bright lights, but it was the frowns on their faces that shook the crowd. With each step they took, uncertainty crept in. The murmurs heightened, whispers of concern caught like wildfire among the people, drawing them closer together. "Stand your ground," an older gentleman shouted, brimming with conviction. "This is our community." Marcus knew this moment was pivotal. He stepped forward, feeling the warmth of the crowd at his back. "We only want to talk," he declared, his voice resonating through the chilled air. "We are not the enemy." Stevens flinched as he watched the officers exchange glances, the briefest hint of apprehension flashing across their stern faces. They were trained to view the crowd as a threat, yet the bond forming there was undeniable. It felt like love, raw and resilient, connecting everyone present. The crowd responded, voices melding into one: "Let us speak. Let us be heard." It was a chorus of humanity that chilled the officers to their core, eroding the barriers that had separated them. Each shout came from a place of pain and hope, like petals falling from a tree in the fall, vibrant and full of life despite the chill of the wind. As the highest-ranking officer stepped forward, a sense of dread washed over Marcus. The officer's gaze hardened, and he raised his hand as if to silence them. "Enough," he commanded, his voice echoing like thunder. "You all need to disperse now." But that command brought no fear, only voices rising louder. "No," someone cried. "We deserve to have our stories told. We have lost too much." Stephen's heart raced. He felt the pull of his loyalty to the badge against his empathy for the people before him. "This isn't right," he suddenly shouted, the words spilling over like a dam breaking. "You can't treat them like this." A small gasp from the officers rippled through the crowd, but they remained steadfast, fidgeting under the weight of uncertainty. The eldest man, trembling yet strong, added, "Listen to us. We are not criminals, we are fathers, mothers, and neighbors." His voice cracked, yet it carried deep resonance. "Every one of us here has faced struggles. Just let us share." And then it happened. A chain reaction. Stories began pouring forth, voices blending in a symphony of pain and hope. A mother recounted the night her son encountered the law, trembling as she shared his fear. Another spoke of the father who begged to keep his children safe from a system that seemed to disregard their worth, each story layered on the last, until a surge of emotion swept through the gathering. Tears found their way down many faces, and even those with hardened hearts felt the cracks forming. Stevens couldn't help but stand rooted, yet he felt a resurgence of humanity rise within him. "It's about their lives," he shouted, the desperation in his voice echoing what they all felt. "We're not here to fight. We're here to connect." At that moment, the tenacity of the unified crowd looped through the officers like a haunting melody. The senior officer hesitated, his hand dropping slowly as if he finally wrestled with the weight of empathy. What do you want?" he asked, hardly above a whisper. Marcus stepped closer, the space tingling with anticipation. "We want to change the narrative. It's not just about justice, it's about healing, about seeing one another. But just as the words settled into the air, the faint but unmistakable sound of sirens grew nearer. The crowd exchanged glances, dread creeping back into their hearts. Would support come, or would this only deepen the divide? Amid the rising tension, Marcus's voice pierced the chaos. We are here. We matter. The echo of his statement ignited a flame within the crowd. As they locked eyes, an invisible thread bound them closer. But just as unity blossomed in that charged atmosphere, would the sirens mark the end of their moment? Would they be met with more division or a chance for understanding? Stevens felt the question cling to his heart. They had the power of change in their hands. But would it slip away in the clamor of oncoming chaos? The sirens blared louder, piercing through the air with an urgency that made hearts race. It felt like a prelude to a storm, a warning that change was on the horizon or perhaps more chaos. Marcus scanned the faces in the crowd. Fear was palpable, but there was also a flicker of determination lit in their eyes. This could be their moment, but it could also mean a harsh return to the way things had always been. Stay calm. Marcus called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He could feel Stephen's hesitation right beside him, and he knew that the officer was at a crossroads. He needed to act now, or the opportunity to bridge the gap could slip away. The crowd's collective heartbeat thrummed in the tense silence. Some stepped forward, fists clenched, while others stood frozen, unsure of the outcome. Marcus glanced at Stevens, who seemed lost in thought, his brow furrowed in conflict. Your stories matter, and they need to be heard. Marcus urged, desperation creeping into his voice. Each of us has the power to rewrite the narrative, to share our experiences and heal together. Just then, a squad car pulled up, its lights flashing but the siren cutting off like a breath held too long. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the vibrant police lights, a woman whose calm demeanor spoke volumes even before she reached for her radio. Officer Dale reporting. What is going on here? She called, her voice clear and assertive. The crowd turned towards her, a mix of hope and anxiety rippling through them. She looked at the higher-ranking officer, who seemed caught off guard at the shift in power dynamics. I asked them to disperse, but he started, his confidence faltering under her gaze. They deserve to be heard, she interjected, stepping forward. What's the harm in letting them speak? We're all here to serve the community. Let them share their truth. A murmur of agreement blossomed in the crowd, and Marcus felt a surge of encouragement. This was an opening for connection and understanding. He could see it in the way the officer's posture relaxed slightly, if only for a breath. The crowd erupted again, voices lifting in unison yet tinged with weariness. Let us speak. We are your neighbors. The passion in their cries ignited a flame of hope in Marcus's chest. Stevens felt the tide shifting. His heart raced as he stood at the intersection of two worlds. If he joined this fight, it meant risking everything he had known, his badge, his safety, even friendships built over years in the force. But looking at the hopeful faces, he couldn't ignore the truth that had begun to resonate within him. He began, feeling the weight of 1,000 voices inside him, urging him to choose humanity first. I want to hear them. We all should. Gasps mixed with cheers erupted from the crowd, disbelief at the officer's sudden shift. As Stevens took a step forward, it felt like a bridge was being built, 1 foot at a time. The senior officer looked thunderstruck. Are you really? Yes, Stevens interrupted, more conviction rising in his tone. We can't ignore them anymore. We need to listen. At that moment, Marcus felt something crack in the air, a shift, a chance to reclaim the narrative. People began to step forward, sharing snippets of their past, stories threading their lives together in rich, vibrant colors. Yet, even as unity pulsed through the air like an electric current, Marcus could sense lingering tension from the squad car. What other forces might still be lurking just outside of view? Would what they had gained be enough to stand against whatever storm was about to break? Marcus locked eyes with Stevens, realization dawning on them both. This fight was far from over, but perhaps they had ignited a spark that could light the way forward, and as the crowd continued to speak their truths into the night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that beneath this fragile connection, a much bigger battle lay ahead. Would they be ready for it? Their stories flowed like a river, words mingling in the humid night air as if the heat itself bore witness. Each voice, a thread connecting lives that had long been frayed, wrapped Marcus in a blanket of hope. One woman spoke of her struggles to find a job despite her qualifications. A middle-aged man revealed how his son had been treated unjustly by the police. Marcus could see tears glistening in the eyes of his neighbors. They were heavy with the weight of truth and yearning for acknowledgement. Stephen stood by, his heart pounding as he absorbed every syllable. The words were raw, each one a testimony echoing deep within him. He felt the tug of compassion wrestle against years of training, the rigid lines of duty blurring ever so slightly. He watched as the crowd's spirit danced between despair and hope, and he knew this was significant. This was more than just a gathering, it was a revolution of the heart. Officer Dale moved through the crowd, her expression turning from professional caution to genuine concern. "What you're saying matters. We need to do better," she urged, her voice a beacon amid the chaos. For the first time, Stevens felt a hint of pride in his badge. It represented something meaningful, something worth protecting. As one young man took the microphone, anticipation gripped the crowd. "My name is Jamal," he said, his voice rising above the murmurs. "I was stopped for something petty, a broken taillight. But the officers, they treated me like I was a criminal. I didn't feel human. I felt afraid." His words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with reality. The crowd shifted, many nodding in solidary pain, gathering around Jamal's truth, but Stephen's chest tightened. He thought of his own encounters, how easy it had been to turn away, to assume the stories were exaggerated. But here, standing with so many pounding hearts, he couldn't deny it anymore. "I'm sorry," Stevens blurted out, unable to contain himself. The eyes of the crowd turned to him, curious and wary. "I've been part of that system. I haven't listened enough. I just want to change that. I want to hear everything." His voice caught the wind, and with it, an awakening. The realization in the crowd was palpable. They were not just being heard, they were being believed. A ripple of energy flowed through them, igniting more voices. People began to share stories of community, of resilience, of dreams dashed and hopes reborn. They spoke not just of grievances but also of aspirations, of families brought together and futures built. But somewhere in that sea of unity, a shudder rolled through. Shadows danced on the edges of the crowd. The faint silhouette of police officers loomed in the distance. Not all were ready for this change. Their presence felt like a waiting trap, ready to snuff out the glow just ignited. "Keep going," someone shouted from the back, sensing the impending threat. "Don't let fear stop you." Stephen's heart raced. He felt sick at the thought of the burgeoning hope being crushed by the weight of old fears. Still, he turned towards Marcus, whose face shone with determination. "Stay strong," he yelled, realizing the moment for real transformation rested within their grasp. But as tension climbed, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a familiar one. It was Lieutenant Martin, the very officer who could silence this newfound courage. With his imposing frame and steely eyes, he was the last obstacle standing before them. "Enough," he commanded. The atmosphere thickened with uncertainty. The crowd's energy faltered as all eyes turned to him. What would he do? Would he reform or reinforce the chains of the past? Would he destroy what they had just begun to build? In that moment, the future was up for grabs, hanging precariously in the balance between fear and hope. What would Captain Martin decide to do when faced with this tide of change? Lieutenant Martin stood there, the weight of authority cloaked over him, but for the first time, he seemed unsure. The crowd's unity pulsed like an electric current, vibrant and undeniable. Each person, each story echoed through the air, lending strength and urgency to their cause. Marcus stepped forward, heart racing but determined. "Please, we only want to be heard," he pleaded, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "These stories matter. They are lives, families, dreams isn't that what you swore to protect. Martin's brow furrowed, but something flickered in his eyes. It was a recognition, perhaps of the humanity standing before him, a sea of neighbors united against the tide of inequality. The tension hung like a fragile thread, waiting to snap or stay strong. A murmur swept through the crowd, and Marcus felt it, hope edging its way into the space where fear had once thrived. Each voice shared was a candle, illuminating the darkness where ignorance and bias had long held sway. Stories flowed, laughters mingling with tears, joy with pain. "I lost my brother to a misunderstanding," one woman shared, her voice breaking. "I don't want anyone else to feel that fear, that helplessness. We deserve more." Every word softened the hardened edges around Martin. He shifted uneasily but stayed rooted, eyes scanning the collective faces. Their pain was palpable, undeniable. The crowd's resilience pressed upon him, a reminder of the very people he vowed to protect. Suddenly, something within him stirred, a longing to reconnect with the community he had watched from a distance. "We need to do better," he finally said, his voice breaking the tension like glass shattering. "You're right. I need to listen." Gasps sounded around him, disbelief mixing with relief. A wave of cheers broke out, rising higher than desperation had ever been before. Martin stepped closer, his stance softer, eyes landing firmly on Marcus. "Tell me your story," he urged, sincerity carving a line through his voice. As Marcus began to share again, he felt the weight of the moment resting heavily on him. "I just want my son to grow up in a world where he isn't judged by the color of his skin," he said, voice wavering but resolute. "Where he can feel safe, loved, and respected just like any other child." And there it was, a link connecting them all, undeniable in its truth. Martin listened intently, nodding as if every word was a bridge being built between the badge he wore and the community he served. "You deserve that, Marcus. Your entire family does," he replied, voice thick with emotion. Around them, others began to share too, voices trembling but steady, uniting in a chorus of intimacy and accountability. "I want to be seen," a young woman stated, her words carrying the weight of an entire generation. "We all do." Martin stepped closer to the gathering, absorbing every story shared, and for the first time, he began to see these faces as more than just numbers or statistics. Each narrative hung in the air like ink soaking into fabric, beautiful, complex, and demanding to be acknowledged. As minutes turned into hours, something shifted. The crowd began to feel less like a divided front and more like a family entwined by threads of shared experience. Laughter broke through the solemnity when a child's voice piped in, "Can we just play now?" That lightness wasn't just a momentary relief, it was the promise of a collective future drenched in love and unity. Even Martin cracked a smile, a small step in his transformation, but a significant one. "Yes, let us play," he echoed suddenly, heart racing. "In this togetherness, we can learn not just to listen, but to be present." Each voice continued the rhythm of change. Realizations bloomed among officers and community members alike. One by one, walls of mistrust crumbled, revealing the warmth of shared humanity. As dusk approached, Marcus looked around at the faces, their stories like petals caught in a gentle breeze, all different but finally coming together. Tears of joy welled in his eyes, not just for himself and Timmy, but for all that they could build. "Together from this moment onward, let us keep building this bridge," Marcus said, voice full of gratitude and hope. "Let us make sure our children don't have to fight the battles we did. They should feel safe and valued." Applause broke out, filling the night air, a celebration of a hope reborn, and Martin stepped back, feeling unshackled from the past. He spoke clearly, "Tonight, we start understanding one another more fully because you deserve that. We deserve that." In that moment, the stories had become a lifeline, connecting connection, reweaving the fabric of their community. Transformation didn't happen all at once, but seeds of change were planted, nourished by courage, vulnerability, and above all, empathy. As they began to disperse, the air buzzed with renewed energy and budding friendships, a tapestry of stories woven stronger than any division could sever. And Marcus looked at Timmy, pride swelling in his heart. The struggle to reform the narrative wouldn't end here. It was just beginning, and together, they would navigate that path. Change starts with one voice, one story, and as long as they held on to that truth, they would rise together, resilient and unwavering. So, don't wait. You need to subscribe now to witness more stories like this. This is the moment to show your support for unity and empathy. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, ensuring these powerful narratives reach every corner. Comment your reactions and feelings about this transformative ending. Your voice matters. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience the beauty of connection and change. Don't let this moment pass. It's time for us to stand together.